A concept that you don't want to miss and how to use it with my good friend that you're going to meet today. Stay right here. Negotiations don't just happen in the boardroom, they happen in everyday life. I'm Susie Tomenchok, expert negotiator, author, and TEDx speaker. I'm glad you're here. I'm going to show you the art of negotiation without manipulation so you can level up, know your worth, and adopt a negotiator mindset. Let's go. Hey, welcome. I am so glad you made the decision to be here today because I have a very good friend of mine, special guest, amazing woman, Diana Cano. How are you, Diana?
I'm good, Susie. I'm glad to be here.
I am so glad you're here. Friends, this woman is a wise woman that I have had the pleasure of knowing for a few years. But Diana, since nobody here knows you as well as I do, tell me a little bit, just tell me about your career. Give us a little bit of a glimpse into the journey of how you've gotten where you are.
Yeah, sure. So I started off as an engineer, factory automation engineering. I was on the plant floor for about 10 years, putting robotics and conveyors and
Wow.
safety equipment onto factory floors. And I loved it. Great job in your 20s. I got to see how a lot of different things were made, got to see a lot of the world during that time frame. I'd say that was like career phase one, right? Then
Yeah.
we move on to career phase two. After I got my master's, I went into IT and I've been there for the last 20 something years. And really, I think that my kind of utilitarian approach to technology is what sort of drives me every day. Like I always think about this great new thing in tech, but what can it do for me and what can it do for others? And I think that kind of comes from that first 10 years doing factory automation and robotics and trying to make processes simpler and better for the people that are working there. So,
Awesome. And so tell me about your leadership along the way. I love your passion around just knowing what you love. And I'm not an engineer, but I have so many friends that are, but you have so much passion about what your brain was meant to do. So tell us about your leadership too.
yeah, sure. When I went into IT, I started off in a role for managing systems for a client. So again, using that kind of client facing work that I had done for the 10 years. Started off in the client services side and then shifted to really broader IT management. So I was the CIO for a division, K-12 education division. I was the CIO for a global division. We spent a couple of years in the UK managing contracts and services there for Europe, and then came back to the US and worked in enterprise architecture for a period of time, really at a time when enterprise architecture was going through a big change as companies were moving to the cloud. So I've always been like in the middle of a change process. I've always been the one
Yeah.
to get into something messy and try to figure out the best path forward. So I've had a I call it my rock wall career, taking on leadership positions, especially in challenging circumstances,
Yeah.
and really trying to figure out how to move people through those changes and how to
Yeah.
make it easier for them to move along with technology advances.
Gosh, and so many people are listening going, that is today. There's so many
Yeah.
leaders that are really challenged right now, moving through change. And yeah, it's great that you embrace that. And you wrote a book about it. Tell us a little bit about your book.
Yeah, I've got a co-author. He and I wrote this book called Management is Not Rocket Science. It's just physics. And the whole idea is as engineers, I started taking physics classes when I was probably 15 years old, right? In high school, you're taking physics classes and then continue that. So a lot of us think in terms of friction and
Yeah.
forces on a body, and we call it free body diagram. I still use those mental models today when I think about management challenges, right? So,
Oh,
what kind of forces are happening on this particular set of people or this particular process? How can I diagram that? Where are the forces that are going to move us forward, the forces that are going to hold us back? And then how do we convert that mindset around physics to all of these new challenges we have today? Because this is the way we work today. So taking a familiar framework that some people might have, and a lot of folks like me from mechanical engineering, it's a very familiar framework. And then just translating that to how to work better with people, how to implement a change when some people are nervous about it. So all of that kind of helps with a little bit of physics thrown in.
oh, I love what you took what you're so good at and you created something like It's so funny when you were describing that, I can tell how different our brains were, and that framework is not something I know, but that is so great because that it applies right to leadership. There's so many people that are listening that are from that background that are gonna benefit from your book. But we're
Yeah,
gonna talk
thank you.
about framing today, right? You
Yeah,
love framing, so we'll talk about the art of framing. Yeah, so you're
yeah,
gonna give us some good advice on that as well.
yeah, some good advice and maybe some things that challenges I've run into that have been tricky. We learn along the way. So some of these tricky things that maybe I've seen can help somebody else.
I love it. So if you want to hear some of Diana's tricky stories, stay tuned. We will be right back. All right, we're back and we're going to hear some tricky stories from Diana. We're going to talk about framing. So let me just say, let me frame it up for us. Got to always frame it up. It's really helping the other party understand your perspective or where you're coming from. It's framing the kind of the journey that you want the negotiation to take or the conversation to take so that you're in the same perspective, if you will. And then for me, framing, I always think about you frame at the beginning and you reframe as you're understanding and collecting where that other party sits or understands. So, do you agree with that, Diana? Is that
Uh,
kind of in
I
sync with
do.
you?
And I think, Susie, what you're really talking about is making sure you're meeting expectations, right? That you're
Yes.
clearly stating them. And so that everybody's on the same page with what you're trying to accomplish. And to me,
Hmm.
I think that's half the battle.
Totally. Do you have a tricky story?
I have a tricky story.
Yes.
So we had a state contract and we were looking to renew that contract. And there was a set of deal points on the table. The lead negotiator was able to tick through some of those business items.
Hmm.
They brought me in because there was this, they called it a deal breaker on browser compatibility. Like anybody in technology has dealt with this before. Your client gives you a list of things that you need to do, and browser compatibility is one of them. This program was for K 12 schools, and we know K 12 schools don't always have the most up to date equipment,
Yeah.
don't have the
Right.
latest versions. So this became a deal breaker, right? We weren't compatible with everything they wanted us to be. And so we really said, we have to move them off of this. But the business team was really struggling with how to do that. In preparation for that session, I was like, okay, why are we here? What's the why?
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
always like to start with the why and the what
That's
in my
great.
head before we
Yeah.
get to that how, right? So
Yep.
what I said is, hey, look, if we agree to this, it's going to hamper our collective ability to deliver a good experience for students.
Ooh.
Because if we have to revert back to an old platform, it's going to be like we're going to be looking bad to those students. We're going to be the Atari and what they want kind of VR experience, right? We're going to be sliding backwards and we're going to get it. We collectively are not going to succeed. And their position was straight on this compatibility issue, but their interest was where we were
Yes.
talking about a good experience for the students.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, let's focus on these interests. Of course, when we're in the conversation and their awareness started to pull up as to how I was positioning my solution, that their first reaction was this visceral reaction. I'm trying to get out of their requirement. I'm trying to put
Yeah.
one over on them or put them in a bad position. And this is a negative emotion they had. Frankly, it was frustration for them, not just me, but about their own frustration with schools and technologies and not being able to
Yeah.
move forward with some of the things that they wanted to do. And that was their interest. So we started to pull back on this. And my normal approach to conversations like this is I do pull in the data. I'm a data driven decision
Mm.
making kind of person.
Of
And
course you
so
do.
we pulled in the data. So we looked at the data right there at the table, and the other side of the table, folks are a little nervous about what's happening at that side of the table. And we pulled out the data. And what we did is we did create a path forward, like treating the schools that had this obsolete technology more as an exception than the
Yeah.
rule. So once we did that, we said, okay, we can commit to a solution for all of them. But the solution might be a little different for those that need the extra attention versus those that were already compatible. So we actually could come up with a way to upgrade the schools that needed the upgrades or offer, I'll say, an exception-based solution for those schools that couldn't. So we on the technical side of the table come to this conclusion, and we turn back to our business partners, and they're waiting with bated breath. And we said, look, it's in all of our best interest to upgrade the school technology because there are other things that students need in their learning. There are other resources that they need. It's important for everybody that we upgrade this. And I frame that solution like how the experience would be better for all the students while still not leaving anybody behind. Because that's the real concern people have is we don't want to leave anybody behind. And telling that story of the vision of where we all were going to go together, everyone could get behind that. We could all say, yeah, that's how we're going to deal with this point that we were so stuck on, and being able to develop a solution. It was a more complex solution than just ticking the box, but it was a better solution in the end for us, for the students, and for everybody. So,
wow. It's so interesting as you were going through it. And I love the understanding the interests, understanding the why. And it's like in your mind, when you're going to reframe, you got to be thinking about where do I need to lead them? And that's exactly
yeah,
what you did. I love that. You were really thinking about you were objective enough to be outside of you to understand what the room needed and reframe it that way. That was such a great example. We're going to
yeah.
go ahead and give some tips to the audience as soon as we're done. So when we come back, Diana and I are going to put together our best tips to be the best framer that you could be. We'll be right back. All right, so we're back with some tips for you and taking the wisdom from Diana. We're going to let her drive the tip. So, what's tip number 1, Diana?
Tip number 1, put the last slide first. So as engineers, we always
Tell me
talk
more.
about all of the information we're building up, and we always have all of our homework done, and we always have all the background, and we're anxious to talk about all that. Put the last slide first. Bring your recommendation, your rationale right to the front so that everybody knows where you're going. If there's some mystery to that, they're going to be distracted by that mystery. So tell them where you're going and then tell them how you got there.
Gosh, I love that so much. That's actually for storytelling. They say that as well, is help the person know where to go, because if not, they're searching for the reasons you're telling them all this stuff. And if you tell them before, then they can take the data, they can, like you said, calmly be in their seat, and then they understand where everything fits. Ooh, that one's good. That one's really good. All right, what's the second one?
I'd say don't be afraid to open that can of worms.
Ooh, tell me more.
If you think that it's a yes, no answer in your negotiation, you're missing potentially a better solution by opening up a can of worms to create a solution together that you can both live with. And I love in group decision making this notion of yes or no, but it's also about, can I live with that? And that's really what we're talking about. And sometimes that can of worms gives you that place that you can both be together.
Oh, and being able to be okay with it being a can of worms and being messy to figure
Yeah, it's
out,
a
but
little
we
scary, right?
avoid it. It
Yeah.
is. But instead
And
of
you can't do
avoiding
it for
it,
every issue, but you can do it at
yes.
least for some of those key issues that are particularly thorny and where those positions are particularly concrete.
Yeah, you know what this reminds me of too? I was in sales, you were in engineering.
Mhm.
And so even those internal conversations where those people so well, you know what they're going to say on both of our sides. But if you can get to that faster and start to unravel and figure out how you're going to move it forward, just get to the can of worms as soon as you can. I love that. That's so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, what's the third one?
My third tip would be to create the story
Huh.
in your close, right? When you're looking for that final agreement, talk about the why, talk about the what, get that story out there that you all can agree on. And then the how comes after that. And the how's where you need your agreement. But in reality, if you tell it the way of the why, the what, and then the how, that vision is something that everybody can agree to and come together on.
Yeah, telling the story. We know that storytelling is so key to that connection between people and understanding, but we forget that it belongs in meetings with people that we know every day, in negotiations when we're getting really close. What a great way to bring the room back together and help them understand that what do you think about it? It's almost like the way you're going to march forward together in
Yeah.
partnership now that you have an agreement. Is that how you look at
Yep,
it?
that's exactly right. Yeah, there's a tool called the concept of operations, which really does formulate how you're going to get to that goal, but it is that goal that you all need to be
Yeah.
really on the same page with, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and in negotiations and meetings and everything, because everything is a
Hmm.
negotiation, it's always riddled with poor communication or misunderstandings because we sit in our own head. And so much through your story and through your tips today really illustrated how important it is to make sure that you're listening to understand the other side of the table all the time so that you can
Yep.
reframe in a way to make sure they're with you, side by side with you.
Yeah. And Susie, I think it's even more important today when so many of us are remote. The one thing we
Oh,
can
yes.
connect on are these stories.
Yeah, that's so good. All right, so I'm gonna see if I can remember them. So the first one
Yeah.
was the last slide first. So tell them where
Yeah.
they're going. The
Mhm.
second one was don't jump right into the can of worms. And then end the third one was end with a story and bring that
Yeah.
connection back together. Ah,
Yeah.
you're brilliant. You're brilliant. All right, you know what's coming next because you can't just talk about it. We have to apply it. So when we come back, Diana and I are gonna be challenged to say, what are we gonna stop, start, and continue doing in relation to what we've learned today about framing. We will be
Yeah.
right
Sounds
back.
good.
All right, my favorite part where you have to put the pedal to the metal or the rubber to the road, or however you want to look at it, stop, start, and continue. As an executive coach, it's great to know about the concepts of leadership and being a professional and really understanding negotiation, adopting that mindset. But until you think about what you're going to stop, start, and continue, you're not going to make the change that you need to make. So I'm putting the challenge to Diana today. So let's start with stop. Diana, what are you going to stop doing as it relates to framing?
So, Susie, you have made me think about a current situation I'm in.
Okay.
And you're making me think about how I can do better with this current situation.
Love
I
it.
have two people that have these two positions, and I'm trying to negotiate a solution in the middle. I think the best thing I can do right now for them is to stop talking to them just one on one. And I got to bring them together to come together
Mm.
on solutions. I think we've had enough conversations around what their positions are and why they're looking to do what they're doing. I got to bring these guys together. And so that's my stop doing the one on one, bring them together.
I love that because sometimes we get caught up in even the emotion, what makes everybody feel comfortable and all of that. And to get resolution and move forward, sometimes we have to break the habit that we've created for ourselves. So I love that. Bring them together. Do you want to name
Yeah.
names right here so they know that you're going to do that? I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I do not.
Ooh, this is juicy. All right. What are you
Yeah.
going to start doing? What are you going to start doing?
I want to hop to the close. I feel
Mm,
like we've done our preparation, we've done our homework, we've talked about our concerns, we've talked about the risks associated with choosing this particular tool. We got to hop to the close. So I have to start the next conversation with them that we are going to leave the room with a decision. It's that analysis paralysis piece that we're all it's easier to stay in analysis paralysis than it is to just hop to that
yeah.
close.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. Is there any way that you can give them a time frame or something? Is there something that could be a catalyst to really to make that
Oh, you just
happen?
made me thought of something. Our collective boss is on vacation next week. They're on spring
Oh,
break. So I could say, hey, we got to get this done next week because when they come back, they're going to ask us. And so let's use that one.
okay. Yes, I love that. What's so funny is there are things that we can create. It is something that can push things forward. Like I always give people permission to go, say your executive coach told you to take this challenge on. But you're right, you can have a catalyst can be, let's make this decision before the boss comes back. We need
Yeah.
to do that.
And then we can make that
Mhm.
recommendation. We can talk about where we
Totally.
came together and we can represent it
Yeah.
together. It's a great way for
Yeah.
this person to come back knowing that something else is off of their list, right?
Yeah. I love this. This is such a great example of how it just happens in our everyday. So what are you going to continue doing as it relates to framing?
I have to keep reminding them the why and the what. They're really concerned about making a change in either direction and the other guy winning. And I have to make sure we say, here's the why and here's the what. This is what we want to do, and this is why we want to do it. We want to pick one way to handle reporting out to executives. Like it has to be consistent. Do we all agree on that? Yes, we all agree on that. So now let's talk about the how. And so I really want to keep grounding them on that, because if I ground them on that, then they'll shift from positions that they're in.
Do you think that maybe challenging them to see it from the other person's perspective, like taking on that, see if you were them, what would you say? Do you think that would be helpful
It's
to
funny.
them?
I did that in my one-on-ones, but I haven't yet tried that as a group. That might be interesting.
Combine
that.
bring them together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I've done it one-on-one. Think of what so-and-so is facing with this. Think of what so-and-so is facing with this. This is why they're coming at it. But I haven't said that in the group setting. Maybe that's a great way to kick off this next conversation. I love it. I'll do it.
Yeah, I love that too, because then that's going to bring them together, like that uncomfortableness of them having to do that, because it sounds like there's a little bit of emotion around this situation. That gives them that ability to understand it from a different lens.
And hear the other person explain that in the moment.
Yeah,
I love it.
The power.
All right, Susie, I'm going to do it.
All right. I can't wait to hear. And this will air after, so then you can let them listen to it. You can say, my plan worked. Diana, it's been such a fun and such a pleasure. I'm going to have you back. I think we should talk about these real coaching life stuff. So I think it's good. Tell people how to find you on LinkedIn and remind us the title of your book.
Sure. I'm Diana Cano on LinkedIn. Feel free to follow me there. I try to content out there on a regular basis, so would love for people to give me some feedback and start the conversation through comments and stuff there. And our book is called Management is Not Rocket Science, It's Just Physics, and you can find it on Amazon.
I love that title so much. Well done. Thank you so much, Diana. It's been such a pleasure. If you want to connect with me, you can go to negotiationlove.com. I'd love to hear from you. But before we go, I want to congratulate you for taking the time to be here today and to remind you that negotiation is more than a skill, it's a mindset. Until next time.